I've rewritten this post in my head 100 times, mostly because every version of it makes me feel stupid in a different way. Some versions make me sound gullible. Some make me sound cold. Some make me sound like I ignored every obvious sign until life practically grabbed me by the face and forced me to look at it. Maybe all of those are true. I'm 36. My wife, Erin, is 34. We've been together for 11 years, married for 8, and we have a 6-year-old son named Caleb. Until recently, if you'd asked me to describe my life, I probably would have called it boring in the best possible way. Not exciting. Not glamorous. Just solid. We had the kind of marriage people stop appreciating because it feels stable enough to be permanent. Same neighborhood for 5 years. Same school pickup routine. Same grocery store, same takeout places, same half-finished conversations about repainting the kitchen someday. We weren't one of those couples who posted anniversary tributes online or took spontaneous couples trips to Iceland, but we were a team. Or at least I thought we were. If I'm honest, things had felt off for a while before everything collapsed. Not in a dramatic way. Nothing you can point at immediately and say, there. That's the moment it all broke. It was more like a shift in temperature. Subtle at first. Erin became restless around the house. She used to be the kind of person who'd put on a hoodie, make tea, and settle into the couch like it was a competitive sport. Then sometime around the beginning of spring, she started saying she needed air at night. The first time she did it, it barely registered. Caleb had gone to sleep, we'd finished cleaning up the kitchen, and she said, "I'm going to take a quick walk. I feel gross sitting inside all day." I said okay. She came back 20 minutes later smelling like outside air and mint gum. Then it became a routine. Not every night. That's important. If it had been every night, maybe I would have noticed faster. It was irregular enough to feel spontaneous but frequent enough to become normal. 2 nights 1 week. Then none for a few days. Then 3 in a row. Always after Caleb was asleep. Always between around 9:15 and 10:30. At first I actually thought it was healthy. She'd been stressed, and walking seemed better than doom-scrolling or drinking wine to decompress. Sometimes I'd ask if she wanted company, and she'd say no in a way that sounded light but final. "You stay. Relax. I just need to clear my head." That phrase started coming up a lot. Clear my head. At some point, I noticed she never took the same route if I casually asked where she'd gone. Just around the block. Down by the park. Near the main road. Past the pharmacy and back. All plausible. All forgettable. Which is why they worked. There were other changes too, the kind that don't look meaningful until they're standing next to each other. She started caring a lot more about how she looked for completely ordinary things. Not in a suspiciously over-the-top way, but enough that it caught my attention. Lip balm before a walk. Perfume before running to the store. A nicer jacket to get some air. She bought new sneakers, but never used them for actual workouts. She also became weirdly protective of her phone. Again, not cartoonishly obvious. She didn't suddenly start sleeping with it under her pillow. But she began turning it face down. Taking it into the bathroom. Smiling at messages and then smoothing her expression if I looked over. One night I asked, joking, "Who's got you grinning at your phone like that?" And she answered too fast. "No one." It was the speed of it that stuck with me. We've all seen people lie on instinct. There's this little reflexive snap to it, like they're slamming a door before you can look inside. Still, I didn't push. Partly because I didn't want to be that husband. The suspicious one. The insecure one. The one who turns every shift in mood into a cheating accusation. And partly because our son was at an age where our evenings were already fragile. By the time he was asleep, neither of us had much left. It was easy to choose peace over questions. Then summer started, and with it came the heat, the open windows, and the neighborhood becoming louder at night. More people walking dogs late. Teenagers cutting through the cul-de-sac. Porch conversations carrying farther in the dark. That's when my neighbor texted me. His name is Darren. He's in his 50s, divorced, lives 2 houses down, and knows everyone's business without ever seeming like he's trying. Nice guy, though. Helpful. The sort of neighbor who owns 3 ladders and somehow appears the moment anyone needs one. On a Thursday night around 10:40, after Aaron had been gone maybe 30 minutes, Darren sent me a photo with no context. At first I didn't understand what I was looking at. It was dark and a little grainy, clearly taken through a window or from a distance. 2 people standing near the side street that leads to the small trail behind our neighborhood. One of them was Aaron. I knew instantly from the jacket. The other person was a man. They weren't kissing in the photo. They were standing close, closer than neighbors talking close, and his hand was on her lower back. Under the photo, Darren wrote, "Hey. I'm sorry if this is nothing. Thought you should see it." I remember reading that message with this weird detached calm, like I was helping someone else process it. I zoomed in. Aaron's face was turned slightly upward toward him. His head was bent near hers, like he was speaking quietly or about to kiss her. I typed. "Who is that?" Darren replied. "Don't know. Seen them twice this week near the trail entrance. Didn't want to assume." The whole room changed around me after that. You know how sometimes bad news doesn't hit all at once? First your brain tries to file it into an innocent category. Then, when it can't, your body starts reacting before your thoughts catch up. My chest felt hot. My hands cold. I stood up for no reason and just stayed standing there in the kitchen, staring at the picture. When Erin came home 12 minutes later, she looked normal. Too normal. She smiled, took off her jacket, asked if I wanted tea. That almost made me angry on its own. I asked, "Good walk?" She said, "Yeah." "Why?" I said, "Who were you with?" The question landed hard enough that she froze. Only for a second. But it was there. Then she frowned and said, "What?" I held up my phone with the picture on the screen. And watched the blood leave her face. I expected denial first. That's what surprised me most. There wasn't any. She sat down at the table slowly, like her legs had stopped trusting the floor, and said, "It's not what it looks like." Which of course is what people say when it is exactly what it looks like, just with details they hope will make them look less terrible. I asked again, "Who is he?" She rubbed her forehead and said, "His name is Nate." Not a coworker. Not someone from the gym. Not an old friend. Nate was Caleb's friend Oliver's father. That revelation hit me with a very specific kind of disgust. Not just because she was cheating, but because this wasn't some distant, compartmentalized affair from another part of her life. This was someone woven into our actual world. Someone whose kid had been in our house. Someone I had stood next to at a school fundraiser while he made small talk about soccer registration and summer camps. I asked how long. She said, "A few weeks." I asked if that was true. She looked away. I said, "How long, Erin?" And then she said, very quietly, "Since April." This happened in late August. So not a few weeks. Almost 5 months. I laughed then, which I know sounds unhinged, but sometimes your body reaches for whatever noise feels closest to not breaking. She started crying and trying to explain immediately, words tumbling over each other. It just happened. They connected. It began with chatting at pickup. Then texting about the kids. Then joking. Then venting. Then a walk one evening after a school event because they both needed air. I swear cheaters always discover the same script independently, like there's some underground template they all follow. Nothing happened at first. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I was lonely. We were just talking. I didn't know how to stop. Every sentence designed to make a chain of choices sound like weather. I asked the question I didn't want answered. Have you slept with him? She covered her mouth and cried harder. That was enough. I said, in my house. She said no, quickly. Then admitted yes, once, when Caleb was at my mother's and I was on an overnight work trip. That moment is still hard for me to describe because it felt like anger and humiliation hit at the exact same second. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was violation. The mental image of her bringing him into our space, into the place where our son built Lego sets on the floor and where we folded laundry and argued about bills and lived our boring, ordinary life, it made me feel physically sick. I slept in the guest room that night, though slept is generous. Mostly I lay there staring at the ceiling while every memory from the last 6 months got re-edited in real time. The school carnival where she insisted on driving separately. The night she stayed late after pickup because Oliver's mom wanted to chat. The sudden late walks. The better mood on certain evenings, the distance on others. The way she had started volunteering for errands she used to hate. All of it rearranged itself into something uglier. The next morning, she asked if we could talk before Caleb woke up. I told her to say whatever she needed to say. What followed was one of the most surreal conversations of my life because she kept shifting between apology and justification so quickly it gave me emotional whiplash. She said she was sorry. Said she hated herself. Said she never wanted to hurt me. Then, in the very next breath, said she'd felt invisible for a long time. I asked what exactly I was supposed to do with that information now. If she felt invisible, why not say something before climbing into another man's bed? Why not ask for counseling? Why not tell me our marriage was in trouble? She said she had tried in little ways, which I think was supposed to mean I had missed signs. Maybe I had. Marriage gets noisy. Work gets busy. Parenting turns romance into logistics if you let it. I'm not arrogant enough to pretend I was a perfect husband. But there is a canyon between neglect and deception, and I refuse to let her turn that difference into fog. That afternoon I called Nate. I don't know what I expected. Shame, maybe. Fear. At minimum, discomfort. Instead he answered like he already knew why I was calling. There was this pause after I said my name, and then he just exhaled. He admitted everything faster than Aaron had. That almost made it worse. He said he was not proud of it. Said things with his wife had been bad for a long time. Said he cared about Aaron. Cared about her. As if that made betrayal more respectable. Then I found out his wife, Julia, had no idea. That changed the direction of my day immediately. Some people think telling the other betrayed partner is revenge. Maybe sometimes it is. But mostly it's respect. It's giving someone the truth you wish someone had given you sooner. I called Julia that evening while Caleb was at karate. I asked if she was somewhere private. The silence after I told her still sits with me. Not because she didn't believe me. Because deep down, she did. She asked for proof. I sent Darren's photo and screenshots Aaron had stupidly left visible on their iPad, which synced messages she apparently forgot existed. There wasn't much, but there was enough. Enough to erase doubt. Julia called me back 20 minutes later, crying so hard I could barely understand her. She kept saying, I knew something was wrong, and I kept thinking that might be the universal anthem of people who get cheated on. I knew something was wrong. I just didn't know the shape of it. Over the next week, my house became a hostage situation where everyone was speaking in lowered voices so the child wouldn't notice the adults falling apart. That was the worst part by far. Not the affair itself. Not even the lies. It was watching normal family life continue on the surface while underneath it all, the foundation had split open. Caleb still needed breakfast. Homework help. Bath time. His favorite blue cup. Stories before bed. Children are merciless that way, not because they're cruel, but because they have no idea your world ended on Tuesday and they still want to know where their dinosaur pajamas are. Aaron kept asking if we could try counseling. At first I said no every time. Then, because 11 years doesn't evaporate cleanly, I said maybe. Not because I believed trust could be rebuilt. More because I needed to know whether there was anything left worth respecting before I made permanent decisions. So we went to 2 sessions. The first was mostly her crying and talking about unmet needs, emotional disconnection, how motherhood had made her feel like she disappeared into routine. The therapist asked if she had expressed this before the affair. Aaron said yes. I said not clearly enough for my wife is about to start sleeping with another parent from school to seem like a likely outcome. The therapist gave me a look for that one, but honestly, dark humor was all I had left. The second session ended whatever small uncertainty remained. The therapist asked Aaron whether the affair had completely ended. There was a pause. Then another. And that was it. Because if someone needs time to answer that question while asking for reconciliation, they've already answered it. Outside in the parking lot, I asked her directly if she was still talking to him. She said, "Not really." I said, "That's not a real phrase." Then she admitted they had messaged a few times for closure. Closure. Another word ruined by selfish people. I told her I was done. Not I need space. Not I need time. Done. She cried, begged, said I was throwing away our family over a mistake. And maybe this is the sentence I'm most proud of from that whole period, because it came out before I even thought about it. I said, "You didn't make a mistake. You built a routine." That shut her up. A mistake is sending a text to the wrong person. Missing an exit. Forgetting a birthday. Sneaking out after your child falls asleep to meet another parent in the dark for 5 months is logistics. It's planning. It's repetition. It's intent. Once I started seeing it that clearly, the emotional fog lifted fast. She moved into her sister's place a week later. We started the divorce process in October. Julia filed too. As far as I know, Nate is now living in a short-term rental apartment 40 minutes away and seeing his kids on weekends. I only know that because suburban neighborhoods feed on gossip the way fire feeds on oxygen. A part of me hates that people know. Another part is grateful I never had to carry the truth alone. The strange thing is, the image that stayed with me wasn't one of the texts or even the photo Darren sent. It was something much smaller. A Tuesday in July, weeks before I knew anything, when Erin came back from one of her walks and Caleb, half asleep on the couch because he'd refused bedtime, lifted his arms and said, "Mommy, carry me." And she did. She picked him up, kissed his head, and carried him down the hall like she wasn't living a double life. That's the part one keep coming back to. How ordinary she could be while betraying us. How seamlessly some people divide themselves. It's been 9 months now. My life is louder and emptier at the same time. On the weeks Caleb is with me, the house feels full of movement and questions and toy cars under furniture. On the weeks he's with her, it feels like someone turned the volume off on existence. But there is peace in not being lied to anymore. Peace in not listening for the back door at 10 p.m. Peace in not watching someone glance at their phone and wondering whose attention they value more than your dignity. A few people have asked if I ever regret ending it so decisively. If I think a longer marriage, a child, and enough history should have made me fight harder. Maybe that sounds noble from the outside. But here's what I learned. Some betrayals don't just break trust. They rewrite the meaning of your everyday life. A park trail becomes a meeting place. A night walk becomes a cover story. A school pickup becomes an opportunity. Your own home becomes evidence. Once someone has done that thoroughly enough, staying isn't forgiveness. It's agreeing to live inside their version of reality. And I couldn't do that. Not for history. Not for appearances. Not even for the family we used to be. Especially not for my son. Because one day, if he ever asks me what happened, I want to be able to say at least one clean thing about myself. I didn't teach him that love means accepting dishonesty just because it arrives wrapped in familiar routines.